just like just overview of Config Manager 2012. I just want to discuss just basics what Config Manager 2012 does, what it is, like what are the considerations that you have if you're going to be deploying Config Manager 2012. So I guess the first point to start is Config Manager 2012. What is it? What does it do? Or what can you use it for? And Lucas, do you want to start first? What is Config Manager? What can you use it for?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah,
I'll hand it over to the
even like whatever you know, I mean, feel free. I mean, what's your own understanding? So someone comes up to you and asks you, and Config Manager, what exactly? I mean, what's your understanding of it? What can it do for us? I mean, right now, like, what will you say? Like, what will you say it is? You're not
Um,
sure at all.
I think it helps um, automating
Yeah,
some
that's right. You're
administrative tasks.
you're right about that. Yeah. So let's say automating administrative tasks. Um, yeah. Okay. Um, Sven, want to add to that?
I think it's yeah, you can use it for software deployment,
Hmm.
inventory of your clients.
Yeah.
What about license checks?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
like are we licensed or not?
yeah.
What's the technical term for this? It's not governance, it's compliant. Compliant.
Compliance. Yeah. Nice
Yes.
one. Compliance.
Perhaps patch management, like
Yeah. Good one.
deploying of Microsoft patches.
Yeah. Anything else that it does? So automating administrative tasks. So what kind of administrative tasks can it automate? Um, I'll probably say all these tied together. Maybe software deployment is part of the tasks because you can automate software deployment. What other tasks can you automate? What about operating system deployment? So that's another task that it can automate for you. So we got software deployment, operating system deployment, compliance, patch management, anything else that you can think of. Marco, what about you? To you, what's config manager and what does it do? So you can type in the chat window. So what's config manager? What does config manager do? Anything else to add, Sven?
Um, what about remote support or stuff like that? Is that possible?
Yep, it does.
Mm.
Let's say remote support, yeah.
Like something like I see what services are running on the machine and what processes, and I can monitor the event log.
Yeah, okay, let's add that. Monitoring, client monitoring.
Yeah.
Anything else? Or let's put it this way. What about like because all these are all true. Every single one of these are true. But what about like in the latest version of Config Manager? What's like the big things that are in this version of Config Manager? Or in the later, or in the 2012 upwards version that we didn't have in the old one?
What about asset management?
Sorry, what's that?
Asset
Asset
management.
management. Yeah. So asset management is part of, yeah. So asset management, and that's like things like software metering and hardware metering.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, if I give my own answer, I would say config manager. It's for anything that has to do with enterprise client management. So that means whether it's your client, whether it's your user computer or your servers, anything that has to do with managing clients. So you have a new computer, whether user laptop or user desktop or server that you just bought. There are things that you have to do to it. You have to install an operating system on it. You have to um, install applications on it after you install operating system on it. Yeah, and you have to keep patching it with software updates. You have to ensure that it is LD. You have to ensure that it is compliant, that no one is using software that they shouldn't be using. So anything that has to do with managing any client that you buy within your infrastructure, anything that has to do with, so you have a client, the entire life cycle of that client, from the time you bought it till the time that you're going to be recycling it, that's what config manager, that's what Microsoft designed it to do. So from the very moment that you bought it, you have to put a OS on it, you have to install applications, install software update, make sure that it's functioning, make sure that it's LD. Then you have to keep monitoring it to make sure that it's compliant and to make sure that there are no viruses on it. So that's part of what configuration manager can do here, endpoint
So
protection.
you also got endpoint
Yeah.
protection. Okay,
So they
okay.
can do
Like,
endpoint protection also.
wow.
So
Okay.
yeah. So like basically to me, I mean if you ask me, I'm just thinking, yeah, so yeah, basically what Marco said. It's just everything that has to do with the life cycle of a client, you can automate it using config manager. So there won't be any a need for you to um, have a machine and then you have to manually deploy the OS or manually deploy the applications or have to spend a lot of productive time trying to patch it or monitor it or clean viruses or stuff like that. Config manager can handle all that. So that's what it is. So config manager is just
David,
yeah, carry on.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the difference between doing this through SCCM
Mm.
and do it through GPOs? Like, uh, I use WSUS for patch management, for example,
Excellent question.
and
Yeah.
all the configuration is done through GPO.
Yeah.
For my Q and development environment, I have one configuration in production, another one.
Yeah.
So what is SCCM gives me that the other methods don't?
Yeah. So I mean, Sven, you want to go for that? You want to answer that?
I think I think you can't deploy an operating
Yeah.
system with
Yeah.
just using group policies. Perhaps you
Yeah.
can deploy software
Yeah.
group policy, but you got a lot of gotchas when you do this. I think most of the technologies are just more advanced,
Yeah.
like deploying an operating system, for example.
Yeah.
You can't do this with just group policy. You can do it with Windows deployment services, but Windows deployment services also got some
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah.
It's just like you can just do the basic
Mm-hmm.
task,
Yep.
image based
Mm-hmm.
deployments.
Yeah. Yeah. Good one. Nice one. Very nice answer. So basically to put it, Lucas. So you have client. You've just bought a new computer in your organization. So the new computer itself has a life cycle, right? Life cycle starts with first of all you have to deploy it, right? So you deploy everything. You have to manage it or maintain it, or in other words, keep it in working condition, because only when it is in this condition will your users be productive, right? So if it's not in a working condition, your users can be productive. So only when it's in that condition. Then at the end of everything, you probably retire it, right? You probably retire the client that you just bought, because then at some point, every hardware wears out, and you can only refresh a system so much. Eventually, it wears out, and then you have to retire it and get a new one, and then you have to go through this whole life cycle again. So here's the thing: is that managing it and keeping it in a working condition includes many other sub processes. So you have something like what Sven mentioned about compliance. You have to make sure that your users are not doing something illegal on a company laptop or desktop. That they're not. So to do that, you can use something like GPO, right? But also managing it and maintaining it is the security of that device. To do that, you can use something like WSOS. In the deployment, like what Sven said, you can use something like WDS for the deployment, or you can use WDS integrated with Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, which is a free tool. You can integrate both together to create some kind of automation, and that will work. But then the thing that you end up is where you have like all these multiple interfaces for doing different things, and then you have this one, and then for endpoint, you probably have, you know, endpoint protection somewhere for malware protection, and stuff like that. And you have like all these different tools for doing different things that has to do with a single client. So good one. Look at the answer that Marco gave. Marco said SCCM is like GPU, WSOS, remote support, SLA ticketing, and OS deployment all in one. So Microsoft is saying that okay, let's have a single tool that will manage this client that you bought, whether server or user desktop or laptop, that will manage it right from the time you buy it, right till the time you retire it, and do everything and be able to do everything that you need to do to keep that machine in productive condition. So that's what SCCM does. That's one of the advantages it brings to the table. But one other thing with regards to GPU is this: is that if you think of GPU, right, um, it has a limitation. What's the limitation of GPU? And Lucas, what's the limitation of the GPU?
In terms of what?
So what I mean, GPU has one limitation when you talk about like clients in an enterprise, because sometimes you don't have machines that are joined to your domain. In fact, sometimes Microsoft recommend that there are some machines that you should not join to your domain. One of the things that we're talking
Right.
about, Sven, is that okay, if you do ADFS, there's this server system rule called Web Application Proxy that you put on your DMZ, the WAP.
Right.
Yeah. And Microsoft recommendation is don't join your WAP to your domain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not joining your WAP to your domain, how do you manage it? How do you keep it compliant if you're not going to be joining it to your domain? But what SCCM can do is, even though a machine is not joined to your domain, you can keep it in a compliant state, right? Or think about it. One other good thing about SCCM 2012 is that this is not only, when we're talking about endpoint, we're no longer only just talking about Windows anymore. We're also beginning to talk about Mac, because now this is like a whole concept of the IT world that we're in today. We're not only just talking about Windows anymore. We're talking about all kinds of devices in the enterprise. We're talking about Mac. We're talking about Linux and Unix, you know, systems. You're talking about iOS devices, tablets, and stuff. You're talking about Android devices, and all these different operating systems. SCCM, well, not fully, but to an extent, can manage them. It can't do OS deployment for Mac or for Linux or for iOS or Android, but it can do software deployment to Mac. You know, it can do asset management like software metering for Mac and Linux and Unix. and then they keep bringing out more new features. So that's like one of the things. You have one pane of glass where you have all these different clients flying around with mobile devices um, and Mac and Linux users and Windows machines everywhere. Machines are not joined to the domain, this Mac user coming, but then you have a single way of ensuring that they are all compliant, of basically taking them from the time you purchase them and taking them to the time that you retire them and managing them with a single tool. So that's what SCCM um, brings to the table compared to like using all these different tools. So it's not as if it's bad. There's still many things that you still have to do with GPO. You still need W source even if you're using SCCM. We'll get to that when we get to the lesson about software updates. So you still need WSource because WSource will be the one that will be getting the metadata from Microsoft still. But then using it, with SCCM just brings a lot of different capabilities that you didn't have before. Okay, let's move a step further. So you've been called into a meeting, Sven.
Mm.
and they're basically saying, okay, the business is considering and saying we probably want to, take advantage of some of the things that SCCM is providing to us. Um, what maybe you've been called in as a contractor. What are the information that you need for you to design a SCCM environment for us? So, what do you need? We need to design this SCCM environment. What are the
Mm.
things that you need to get SCCM running in our environment?
Yeah, you need the devices. So as
Yep,
a company just using Windows 7 or also Windows 8, Windows 10
good one.
operating system. So you need the operating system, and then you need the software that the company wants to deploy. And also you need the client hardware because you have to care about the drivers because you can't deploy an operating system without any drivers. So is it just one hardware model or is it like 5 different hardware models or is it like 120 different hardware models? So
Yeah,
this will make a big difference. And yeah, it's always interesting to know something about the network structures, or are they
good one.
sites?
Yeah, so I was gonna say I think I asked the question wrongly. Network structure. Yeah, because
Yeah.
basically now we're talking about high level now. We're talking about high level. Now in terms of you deploying SCCM, you know,
Mm,
if I want to deploy, if you know, if I'm called in to say to a business and say we want to deploy SCCM, first things that you ask is the one that you've asked, device information. Tell me about the device. How many devices do you have? How many locations do you have? You know, are you a one office location or you have multiple offices in different places? Then probably the next question will be the next one that you mentioned. Tell me about your network structure. What's the link between your office in Birmingham and your office in China? What's the link between the one in China and the one in India? You get the point. So,
yes.
so those high level information, how many devices are in that location? Because those are the kind of things that will make you know, okay, do I need to put, which we'll talk about now, another site there? Because SCCM, if you have like a site server, it has a maximum number of clients that you can support. So if it has the maximum number of clients, let's say, okay, the latest version can support 150,000 clients, but then they have an office location somewhere that's got 200,000 users. Maybe they are they are like a really huge company and they've got like somewhere in the desert where they've got 200,000 users there. I need to have that information to be able to decide, okay, this is how we're going to design our SCCM infrastructure. So that's the kind of one, that's the question I was asking, sorry. So, yeah, device information. OS, how many devices do you have? What else will you be interested in knowing that will help you in terms of just think basically what will you need if you want to deploy a new server? As system admins, you want to deploy a new server. What are the kind of questions you'll be asking?
Mm, yeah, what are
What
the
version?
What
yes?
what?
The version of the server.
As in what version? What do you mean by what version?
Well, it depends on if it's a Windows server, if it's 2008, 2012, 2012 R2.
Mm, okay, yeah, server version. But why would you ask for server version? What's the reason? What would be your reasoning for asking for what? What would that information do for you?
Um, that's the application that's gonna be running on the server may depend on the version.
Yeah. But okay, but in this case, we're talking about you deploying an infrastructure. So we're talking about you're deploying an infrastructure. You want to know how many devices they have that you'll be managing. You want to know what the network structure is. Um, is there anything else that you want to know? What about how many users do they have? Ah, okay. So Marco said, so Marco, you want to deploy a SCCM infrastructure. What are the questions that you ask that will help you to know how to properly design it? That's the question. So what are the questions that you ask? I usually have like this acronym that I learned in uni. I call it SAP-SMOA. So S simply means scalability. So this is from a Cisco book, actually.
Ah,
But
okay.
but but when I read it, the title of the book is
Yeah, they really like these acronyms.
yeah, it is.
It's in
It
so
is.
OSI context.
It is. So it's like I've forgotten the title of the book in unit. It's a Cisco book called um something first what's the title of this book? Um First deployment, something like that. Cisco first. Not Cisco first book, but Cisco. It's something first was is in the title of that book. Um, I've forgotten title of the book. Yeah, but it's something that has to do there. So yeah, I've forgotten. So it was that book that I read. So then they were talking about you want to deploy a network. These are the things that you look out for. And I was like,
Yeah,
actually, I can apply this to any kind of infrastructure that I'm deploying because they apply everywhere. You're thinking about, okay, um, if you have 200 users in this location, are you planning to, add more users in the next 5 years? So if I put a distribution point here that probably can support 1,000 users, and then all of a sudden next month you hire 1,000 users, and then we're running around. So you're thinking about the scalability. You're asking how many users, how many devices, any plans for growth in this location in the next 2 months, any plans for growth in that location in the next 2 months. You're asking availability.
mm,
Okay, this is the function that this will be providing for you. It will be providing this function. You'll be able to deploy operating system and this way. So if these functions are not available for 1 hour, will your business crash? So that would let me know, do I need to put two distribution points, for high availability? Do I need to put, two management points for high availability? Or is it a case of if management point fails, don't worry, I have 5 hours to get it working, and stuff like that.
yeah,
I say, okay, we can make this as fast as you want, we can make it such that your operating system deployment is, 1 hour, it's done. So it depends on you now. If you want 1 hour, of course, if you ask a business and say, yeah, well, 1 hour deployment, people say, yeah, definitely want 1 hour deployment. And you're like, yeah, 1 hour deployment will cost you to probably change on your switches, and deploy gigabit switches, and have like a really, really high RAM SCCM distribution point. Then be like, okay, okay, no, it's all right, we can do it 4 hours. So, you ask questions like that, what's the performance? And then security. So security in terms of SCCM would be, hey, is there like any data on this device? For example, things like software metering, um, where You can go on devices and be collecting files, you know. That could be a privacy concern to some users, in terms of more recently, I know at my work, the security team were like, yeah, we have this little software that we're going to deploy to everyone's machine, and instantly managers from different departments started replying, what are you collecting from my machine? What are you collecting from my machine? I need to know what you're collecting from my machine. Are you collecting any private information from my machine and stuff like that? um
Yeah, especially the work console, right?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, I
Yeah,
know this. I know this.
yeah.
It's always a fight.
Yeah.
Fight
Exactly.
between the server guys, the networking guys, and the guys from the work consoles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And okay, then maybe this one says usability, but this one is probably less important with regards to SCCM. The next one is affordability, which has to do with
Yeah.
what money do you have to spend, what's your budget for this project, for this SCCM work that you're planning to do. So those are the kind of those are the kind of so this kind of like a framework that will lead you to the kind of question that you ask. So you think about it like, okay, in terms of scalability, what kind of questions do I need to ask? You know, if I want to design a system that, if they add 10 users tomorrow, we won't have to start running around to deploy. It can accommodate new users. It can grow as the company grows. So scalability and stuff like that. Okay, so we've talked about that just a little bit. Let's move on and talk about the SCCM hierarchy. So the first thing that we need to know with SCCM is this concept of something called a site. So what is the ASCCM site? So it's this concept of something called a site, and we'll explain all that. So think about this. Let's draw some little diagrams. We have something here. Let's draw this one here. Um, we have this one here. We have this one here, and let's put this one here. So, um, yeah, we just put little circles. We'll tell what all this means or what they're referring to later. So you have all these little circles in in all these different locations, so to speak.
Many X, many boxes.
So the concept of SCCM is when you're talking about a site. So that's the first basic concept in SCCM. Oh, sorry,
Oh,
sorry to hear that. Yeah. So we have a concept of a site, and the concept of a site with SCCM. What do you think the concept of a site means? Like, what else when we're talking about SCCM and we mentioned site? What does that mean? Because if you go on SCCM and you have your SCCM ISO file DVD, and
mm.
then you put it on the machine, and then you go install next, next, next. Then one of the first questions that it will ask you is, do you want to deploy a central administration site or a primary site? And like,
Mm.
okay, what does this mean by central administration site, primary site? So that's the very basic concept that we
Mm.
need to understand in the system. So what does it mean by site?
So, well, in an Active Directory context, the site is
Yeah,
a place of well-connected clients. So,
excellent.
you, you configure subnets,
Hmm.
and the subnets are connected to a site, and in a site, the subnets are well connected, like gigabit or fast Ethernet.
Good one. Good one. Very fast network connectivity between them. Nice one. Excellent. I mean that's like the perfect answer for this one. So it's the same as the concept of site in Active Directory. It's well connected devices. So well, yeah, that's also right, Marco. But we'll come to one of the reasons why it may not be location, even though location is also part of what could define a site. So what that means is if you have an office in Germany, your office in Germany, you have like maybe Cisco gigabit switches everywhere. That's obviously like very fast connection between your clients and the server. That's connection that apart from your initial investment, you're not paying anything for them, and it's something that's really, really fast. But then within um, the one office and another office, let's say this link between this office is just 10, 10 megabits per second. So that's the link between this office and this office. So definitely, you have to be concerned about this one because what you don't want is users in this location trying to build a new laptop from a server that's in this location. So what you don't want is somebody sitting down here and trying to download, you know, 8 gigabit file operating system from this location in order to build a laptop. But so what a site just basically means is you mean well connected devices together. So in a site, you have a management point. And don't worry whether you understand what this means or not. We'll get to that. So in a site, you have a management point. You probably have a distribution point. We'll talk about this one when we talk about the roles later. Probably have a distribution point, and what and yeah, you have clients that are assigned to that site. So that's the concept of a site. So you have a location or an office somewhere, and then you have devices that are connected on a very fast network. So in Config Manager, there are three kinds of sites that you can create. And then we know what the kinds of sites look at. So what are the kinds of sites that you can have in Config Manager? So don't worry whether you understand them or not. They'll become clearer, as we do the lessons, as we do the Hangout. So what are the types of sites in Config Manager? Because you have different types of sites and different purposes. Okay, I can't get to Lucas. What about Marco? You can type your answer. So what types of sites do we have for Config Manager? Anything? Yep. No, no problem. Okay, what about you, Sven? What are the types of sites that we have?
One of the central site,
Nice ones.
uh,
Central administration site.
then standalone site.
Yeah, you're close. It's called something. It's called a particular word. It's called primary site.
Ah,
Yeah.
and the secondary site, of
Nice
course.
one. Excellent. And secondary sites. So, I mean, we'll talk about all these in details later, but let just to make some points. So, what this could be is you only have a central administration site when you have more than one primary site. So, um, I have my new Shiny server, the virtual server. I put the ISO in it. I select SCCM. The very first site that I'm going to install in my infrastructure, yeah, will be the primary site. And basically, I'll go here and I will install my primary site here. And what will happen is all my clients, so let's call all these guys, let's call them C. So all my clients will be assigned to this primary site. And the whole point of them being assigned to this primary site is that's where they report to. That's where they get their policies from. That is what administers them. So you have a site, and inside this site, you also have a system that will be the site server, which will be like the main manager of that site. So inside every site, there's a site server. So you go put in your DVD, it asks you to install a site, you install the site. The first system that you're installing is something called a site server. And on that site server is going to install automatically two roles, which is the management point which we'll talk about later again in details, management point and the distribution point. And what that means is for this client here, so on this site server, we have, let's call them MP and D. We have management point and distribution point, which means this client, whenever it wants to find out what policy am I supposed to apply, what compliance am I supposed to be enforcing, it would need to talk to a management point. And the way it's going to locate the management point is based on the site that it is assigned. So I can have another primary site in this location, and the primary site, I will have a site server for it also. And automatically, when I install it, it will install the MP, management point, and the DP, which is the distribution point. And then I have all my clients assigned to this site also. So one thing to notice about the concept of site is this. In a primary site like this, you can have up to a maximum of 150,000 clients. So that's why, yeah, that's a lot, right? Actually, yeah, actually, you can have more than 150,000 clients. Actually, according to Microsoft, you can probably have, I think, maybe about 230,000 clients in total. But the thing is, you can have 150,000 Windows clients, Windows and Linux clients. Then, if you're managing mobile devices, you can have maybe up to 50,000 of those. If you're managing Mac devices, you can probably have about 10,000 of those. You get the point. So you can add them together. So it's not as if it's just, but 150,000 Windows and Linux machines. Actually, let's just search this. Let's just go um, configuration manager maximums maybe. And let's see what's maximum configuration manager 2012 maximums. Hello, Chris. Welcome. Here we go. We've got something here. Let's see. Let's see. Client. Okay, yeah, here we go. Clients per site. Okay, here we go. Now look at this. What they're basically saying is, you have client group one. So let me expand this so that it won't be small. So you have client group one, and what client group one means is that and the client group includes computers that run a client for configuration manager and includes Windows Server, Windows Client, Windows Embedded Operating System, and Linux and Unix clients. Yeah, so that's client group one. Client group two involves basically everything that is Microsoft Intune managed, which is mainly mobile devices like iOS, Android, or Exchange Server Connector. So don't worry whether you understand all these or not. Every single one of these, including Microsoft Intune, we're going to do a lab on Microsoft Intune. We'll all open a Microsoft Intune account and see. So we'll do so all these ones, including Exchange Server Connector. So that's client group two. Client group three is some legacy mobile devices and then the Mac client. So what they're saying is on a standalone primary site, in SCCM 2012, this is the latest version, you can have up to 150,000 client group 1, which is the Windows and Unix. You can have up to 50,000 client group 2, and you can have up to 25,000 client group 3. So if you add all this together, that's like 150,000 plus. That's about 225,000 in total that you can have. So that's just for one single site. And the other thing about the concept of this site is, so let's say, so actually it's not just 150,000 clients, it's 225,000. And you can have up to, is the, so this one, I'm not sure. I could be wrong on this. You can have up to 100 secondary sites, or maybe 250, maybe 250 secondary sites under this primary site. So you can have this primary site here, you can have up to 2,025,000 clients on it. You can have up to 250 secondary sites under it. And And I think for a secondary site that is under a primary site, I think you can have up to 10,000 clients. Now let's confirm that. Um, so that let's confirm what Microsoft has to say about the um, secondary side. Okay, yeah. Okay. Beginning with config manager, yeah. So you can have up to 10,000 clients. So whether client group 1, group 2, group 3, you can have up to 10,000 of them in a secondary site. So that's one thing to note. No problems. So that's one thing to note. You can have up to 10,000 clients. So when will you need this one called a central administration site? Or let's just call it CAS for short. When will you need something called a CAS? You want to give it a try, Sven? When will you need a CAS? In what situation? So you now think about if I can have 225,000 clients, what else am I looking for? How many locations have 225,000? So why would I need a central administration site? Or in what situations will I need a central administration site? No problem there. Chris, you want to try that? You want to go for that? In what situation will we need a central administration site? You're muted, so you may need to unmute yourself, Chris.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in what situations? Because now we're talking about basic concept in config manager infrastructure design is the concept of a site. That's the like the cell is the basic component in the body. The site is the basic component of config manager. So just so okay, we need a CAS. In the situations that we need a CAS is anytime you have more than one primary site, you have to have a CAS. So if you have only one primary site, so actually what Microsoft has done is that you don't have to have a CAS. You can have just one primary site, and that's recommended. Because there really should not be that much reason for you to have a CAS. But let's say you're like one of these big, huge corporations that you have more than 225,000 clients. Yeah, that means you have to have more than one primary site, right? And the moment you create another primary site, you have to create a CAS. So that's the point. So that's when you need the CAS if you have more than one primary site. And the thing to know about the CAS is in the past, in SCCM 2007, if I create a primary site, or even SCCM 2012, I create a primary site, that's it. If I now decide later, oh, I need another primary site and I'll need the CAS, I'll need to uninstall config manager completely, reinstall another config manager, start everything from scratch, and then make sure I put the CAS first. But what they've done with the latest release, with the Service Pack 2, I think, or Service Pack 1 or Service Pack 2, what they've done is that you can have your standalone primary sites to begin with. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, we need to scale, we need to expand, we need more than 225,000 clients. So what you can do is install the CAS here and then link an existing primary site to a CAS. Now that's something that's exciting to people that have been working with config manager before, because it's trouble. Imagine you have everything set up, all of a sudden you have to uninstall everything and then begin from scratch. But now you can have, so the advice would be start with your primary site, just start with that first. If you need to expand to a CAS later, you can, you don't need to start with a CAS now. So you can just install the CAS and then expand your primary site, link it up with the new CAS, and everything goes, and then you put your secondary primary site there. So that's the point. So secondary site, we have a limitation of up to 10,000 clients. So here's the thing, is that this secondary site, it's under this primary site. If I want to install this primary site, I'll put the DVD in. It will say which kind of site do you want to install. I'll say I want to install a primary site. Then it's going to install the site server. As part of that process, it's also going to install a database on this one. So a database will also be installed. And also the same thing goes for the secondary side. If I say I want to install the secondary side also, it's going to install a database. And we'll talk about like the differences between this. So it installs database on primary side, secondary side, and the CAS. The thing with this is that this secondary side is under this primary side. This secondary side has client inside it. Now, all these clients under the secondary side, they are not actually assigned to this secondary side, because this is the key thing to remember in case you'll be doing the exams, is that you can't assign clients to secondary sites. So that's one main thing, because this can confuse people to be like, okay, my clients are in this site, I've installed a secondary site. When in configuration manager, the configuration manager will say, which site do you want to put this client? I go and select this secondary site. But the thing is, even though you've selected that secondary site, the clients are not assigned to that site. The clients are assigned to the primary site that the secondary site belongs to. So basically, this secondary site is similar to what they call in SCCM 2007 a proxy site. So it is just there as a proxy. It's not really like the one that's actually like doing like all the management. And you see that as we go, because this site here, you can have a configuration manager console, on your laptop or desktop, and connect it to this site here and begin to manage this site. You cannot connect a configuration manager console to this secondary site. Why? Because there's no client assigned to it. There's nothing for you to manage. It's a proxy. There's nothing to manage or configure. All the configuration comes from this site. All the assignments come from this site. So this is just a proxy. So what does this one do then? The purpose of this one is you install it. It also has a site server, the site server, and it also has a management point. So this client goes, oh, I need the policy for that is assigned to me. What will happen is this client will go and communicate and say, I need my policy. This guy will go and talk to the site server and say, site server, we need policy. Site server will go download the policy from this guy here and pass it on to this guy here. So it's basically just taking away the load. And let's say, let me put it this way also. If this guy has just installed an operating system or has just installed a software, it needs to report back to the database and say, I've successfully installed this operating system. He reports that to his management point. The management point sends it to the site server. The site server does not go and store it in this database again, because this is just a proxy. The only thing in this database is configuration information, nothing else. It doesn't contain any client information. So the information itself, this site server, we keep like caching it. It's kind of like a cache, right? It keeps caching it so that this guy doesn't have to be going all across your WAN to talk to this guy. This guy can be talking to this one, and then whenever this one is ready, he can send everything to this guy at once. You get the point? So secondary site, it's a proxy site. Primary site is the only site that you can assign clients to. See this one here at the top. No problem, no problems. No problems. Yeah. So see this guy here at the top, the CAS. The CAS only does administration and reporting. You cannot assign any clients to it. So the only site that you can actually assign any clients to in this whole hierarchy is your primary site. So that is why the focus is on the primary site. So what Microsoft has done in SCCM 2012 is you don't actually need a CAS. You can actually do with just one primary site within your entire infrastructure, and that will be okay. So what used to happen in the past, and this is where we'll be rounding up. So what used to happen in the past in SCCM 2007 is you have your primary site here, your secondary site here, So this is primary site and this is secondary site. And the main reason why you have the secondary site is that, oh, I don't want traffic to be going down to people in this location without control. So what I need to do is, in order to control this traffic, I need to put a secondary site because that's the only way you can control the traffic. And then in this secondary site, I now need to put a distribution point in this secondary site. So you're just wasting the time to have another site and then have a distribution point, all because you want to control traffic that is flowing downward from the primary site. So what Microsoft has done in this version is to say, scrap all this model. This one, you can have your primary site here. This can support up to 25,000 clients. So if you have a branch office here somewhere, and you're like, I don't want users that want to build laptops to be connecting to this guy over a 10 meg link to download a 10 gigabyte image. So what you can do is put a distribution point here. Put a distribution point here, and you can control traffic that flows to this distribution point now in SCCM 2012. So this is not something that was possible in SCCM 2007, but in SCCM 2012, you can control traffic that flows downwards to a distribution point. So what that means is that you can actually do with just a single site and distribution points in your branch offices. Because now you don't need the secondary site to control traffic flow. You can control it on a distribution point going forward. So that's like the main thing. And then the other thing to mention before we finish for today is the cars. So under a cars, I think you can have up to, is it 10? I think you can have up to 10 primary sites under. But let's confirm that. So, because that could be wrong. So I think you can have up to, let's see. How many site configuration the cards? I think it's 10, but I could have changed in the latest version because they recently released the new version. Okay, let's see. Is this 2007? No, this is not 2007. So what do they have to say? Yeah, look at what we mentioned. Yeah, look at this is what we mentioned. Yeah, so it says prior to SCCM 2012 Service Pack 1, the initial hierarchy design you selected was permanent. So if you select a primary site and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, we need to grow more than 225,000, clients, and then you're like, oh, I need a cast now. Basically, it's permanent. You have to uninstall it. So specifically when you use SCCM, so even if you use SCCM 2012 with no service pack, there are no options to convert a standalone primary site into a child primary site that reports to a central administration site. Therefore, to change the configuration, you have to uninstall the standalone primary site and then install the site again as a child primary site below a SCAS. So, however, beginning with Configuration Manager Service Pack 1, so you have to have minimum of Service Pack 1, you can expand a standalone primary site into a hierarchy that includes a central administration site. So you can have your primary site, you don't have to worry, you can scale later into a CAS if you need to. But the main information that we're looking for is how many, so look at this. central administration side does not process any client data. So it's mainly for administration and reporting, nothing else. Yeah. So this one is the one that your client, so a required site that manages clients. So look at this. All clients are assigned to a primary site. So this one is just kind of like just a proxy dummy site. Yeah. So so the data, somebody say, but the secondary site also has a database. So what's the database doing? It's storing configuration. So which is why you don't have to be concerned if your secondary site fails, because you can basically reinstall it easily because it doesn't contain any information in database, only configuration. But if your primary site fails, the database contains clients information. So all the reporting that your clients have been doing, all the history, if that database fails, so when you're doing, so we'll talk about that when we get to the point of planning for backup for your config manager site. The main thing that you want to focus on is backing this up. Because actually, if this one fails, you can actually just have another server with the same name and IP address and leave it alone. And this guy will automatically detect this name and it's like, hold on, you used to be a secondary site. What happens? There's no more database on you, and reinstall the secondary site role on it automatically. Because this one is constantly checking and saying, are you okay? So if it's not okay, this one, because whenever you want to install the primary site, you need an ISO, right? You put the ISO in the virtual machine and install it. But whenever you want to install the secondary site, you go to the primary site, right click on the secondary site server and say install the secondary site role on this server. So you actually install the secondary site from within the primary site. So this one can fail, as it wants, put another server in place, give it the same IP address, the same name. This guy will reinstall it and everything will be okay because that database, it's only for configuration information. And then the main information that we're looking for is the cast. How many primary sites can we have be? Um, hmm, I'm not sure. Like, okay, maybe let's see. But this is old information. We need like more recent information. So there's information somewhere. I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking under a primary site, you can have up to 250. Let me search for 250, maybe. No, there's not 250. So under a primary site, you can have up to 250 clients, up to 250 secondary sites. But under a CAS, I think you can have up to 10 primary sites, but I'm not sure. So that we'll need to confirm. How many? Um, let's see if anything. Um, okay, so you will have more than 250 secondary sites. That's under a primary site. But what about under the CAS? How many primary sites can we have? Oh, okay, sorry. It's 25, not 10. So we can have a maximum of 25 child primary sites under a CAS. But here's the catch also. So this is where we end for today. So here's the catch. You think, okay, hold on, if I can have 225,000 clients within a primary site, and I can have up to 25 primary sites, that means I can have up to 25 times 225,000 clients. No, you can go to a maximum of 400,000 clients in a CAS. So the fact that you have a CAS with 25,000, with 25 primary child sites, primary sites doesn't mean that you can have 25 times 225,000 because a CAS itself, the maximum number of clients that you can have in the hierarchy of a CAS is 400,000. Can we have two primary sites but not in the same domain environment? Yeah, I think so. You can. So you can. But then you need to be okay. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Because I'm thinking how the communication with the CAS. Let me check that. Let me confirm that, Marco. I think you can, but let me confirm that. I'm not too sure. Yeah. So just take note of that. It doesn't mean that we can have, because we can have a cars and have 25 chat primary sites, 225,000 times 25. No, we can support up to it. So what happens if you have more than 400,000 clients globally? You have another cars. That's what you do. So instead of another cars with your primary sites again, and then distribute them that way. But most corporations actually, you won't need more than one primary site. And what you then do is you then use distribution points. Mainly, you use distribution points, no longer secondary site, because you don't really need secondary site anymore. So again, maybe during the next hangout, we talk about the reason why you may need a secondary site. Because most of the things that you need a secondary site for before is to control traffic. But now you can control traffic to a distribution point. So you don't need a secondary site to do that. But in a situation where you need a secondary site will be a situation um, where you don't want your client reporting information, because now you can control downflow traffic, right? But how do you control traffic that is flowing upward? Because your client are still talking to the site server at the top. That's when you put a secondary site, because that can take all the information from the client, right? And then on behalf of the client, send it to the primary site rather than the client talking directly to the primary site. But if all you're just concerned about is, I don't care how often they talk to the primary site, all I just want is, I don't want them to be downloading, 10 gigabyte of image. Just put a distribution point there, distribute all your images to that. They'll get the images. You can control traffic flow downwards. So I hope that was helpful a little bit. So maybe next week we'll continue, and then we'll talk more about config manager hierarchy, and then we'll move on from there. Yeah. So is there any question? So okay, Marco said, I have a domain called demo.local, and on other side, I have contoso.local. Is that a problem? So that actually I'm not too sure, but I'll tell you one thing is that I think that's one thing that we'll be doing in this whole Hangout series. Because one of the things is, it's one of the situations that I have to deal with at work, because we have so many domains for engineering and labs and all the other stuff, and then we have to bring them into our config manager. So now we are settled on a normal staff domain. We're settled config manager, but now we need to integrate all these other domains in. So we have to sit down and have a proper plan on how we're going to integrate them. But my first thought would be, yes, you can have have that in a different domain. But the only thing that you probably need is the permission. You probably need trust between them, between those domains. Because if there's no trust between those domains, then, because the CAS will definitely need permissions on the site servers. Okay, no problems. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So the time, so we started like an hour and a half ago, something like an hour and a half ago. That was like 9 o'clock UK time. So which time zone are you in, Chris?
Right now, currently, I have 4:25 p.m. Central
4:20.
Standard Time.
Okay. So that'll probably be three something. Yeah, that'll be 3 o'clock your time.
3 o'clock my time.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'll be 3 o'clock your time. Yeah. Um, let me cancel screen sharing. Yeah, so that'll be 3 o'clock your time.
Okay.
Marco said, and can you push information from secondary site to primary site on your demand? No, 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 you can't. But I don't think there will be any reason for you to want to push information like that. So I don't think there's any reason why you want to do that.